Welcome to the January 24th, 2024 Select Board meeting. This meeting is being recorded. If you'd be so kind to stand and rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We certainly have a busy agenda tonight. We're going to start off with the town administrator's report.
Thank you, David. So I'm really pleased to provide an update that over the last 2 weeks we've gone through all 7 respondents of the RFP that we sent out for the possibility of converting the Hadley Elementary School into a hotel. It was absolutely amazing to hear the vision that a number of these firms have for the use of that property and how we can reinvigorate the economic strength of Humphrey Street. A review committee made up of myself, Pete Kane, Marzi Galaska, and Select Board Member Katie Phelan and Peter Spelios carefully reviewed these proposals, and we are recommending 3 of the proposals to be advanced. So we have scheduled a meeting on the night of January 30th here at the high school to go through those presentations, and really want to invite the public to enjoy and follow that process, and join us as we really try to define the most successful proposal. Pleased to report that we have rehired a individual that worked in our clerk's office during the pandemic. Matthew Dalis has started as the new administrative assistant for our police chief, Ruben Casada. Matthew joined us today at our department head meeting, and comes to us after spending some time with the Central Mass Planning Commission. He's got a background in GIS and a lot of data analytics. I think he'll do a terrific job helping Chief Casada in a very complicated role. I continue to work with state agencies and stakeholders to engage our state and federal partners with meetings and discussions regarding how to address challenges with Kings Beach. On February 2nd, I have a working meeting for the first time with a number of agencies involved with state regulations and federal regulations. We've reached out to Executive Office of Environmental Affairs and the EPA, DCR, but also CZM, a lot of the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that have a role to play in supporting regulations that would allow us to see infrastructure investments that would help us protect citizens. We're continuing to advance conversations around the UV disinfection, outfall extension, and periacic acid.
Otherwise, it just implies that we're going to take public comment.
That's fine. Right? Members of the public, stand up. You have 3 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Lehman.
Jonathan Lehman, Precinct 6, town meeting member, and I'm also vice chair of the Historical Commission, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Historical Commission. We do have an agenda item, but what I just heard is it's appropriate for me to bring this up now, so I will. It's an article that we requested in January for the town warrant, and the language was written by town council. I'll read it very quickly. It's a short paragraph. It's to see if the town will vote to transfer $25,000 from free cash for the purpose of preserving, restoring, or salvaging the General Glover House located at 299 Salem Street, Swampscott, Mass., or any historic components thereof, or to take action relative thereto. And this article came about because of a fine that the Historical Commission levied late last year on a property that was demolished improperly, and we levied a $25,000 fine, which has been collected. The money is actually in the town now, but town meeting needs to vote on this. The Glover House is something that we're working on right now, whereas my understanding is that this money is tied up in an account until the Department of Revenue has to approve it. So the free cash thing is sort of a stopgap until it's approved. So the important thing here is it's not coming out of taxpayer money. It's just a transfer. So we want to be sure that this article gets into the warrant. The other piece of this is that excuse me, we have a revolving fund with a $5,000 limit, and it's not possible to raise funds or to accept fines or that sort of thing without raising that. My understanding is that it's not possible to have an unlimited amount. If it is, that's what we would want. And if we have to put a dollar amount, I'd recommend $500,000, that article to go in as well, because the two of these go hand in hand.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman.
I'm Doug Schmidt, 45 Rockland Street, Precinct 4. So, this is regarding just pouring some information into trying to get the resiliency of our beach here in Swampscott, our shoreline, at the forefront. September of last year, I was going to be going on a trip in about a week over to Germany for a walking tour. And there was another storm just like the last two we just had. And, you know, it happened the night, and then during the day I was at work. So after work, I went down to the beach. It was calm. So I went down to check out Fisherman's Beach. I went out to walk up onto the pier, and the planks were missing, but it was dark. So I stepped, and I went straight down. My knee smashed into, like, the underneath of the pier. And, you know, luckily, I was able to pull myself out of there and kind of hobble away with just a scratch and a bruise. But, you know, I kind of was reminded of that because it's blowing out, you know, there tonight again. It's still, at least it's roped off now. But so just wanted to bring that up, that it's pretty important. Things are getting destroyed and people are getting hurt. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Good evening, Chris Swartz, 33 Winshaw, District 5, I think. We have one of the prettiest coastal landscapes in the Boston skyline, often bordered with fantastic sunsets. But Nahant Bay is just not something nice to look at. It's a vital economic hub for restaurants, leisure and tourism, the lobster industry, and it's the border between our homes and the ocean. According to NOAA, 40% of our nation lives in coastal counties, yet the coast accounts for less than 10% of the continental U.S. People want to live by the water, and that's pretty obvious by the statistics. The people wanting to live there increases the value of our properties, which in turn increases town revenue through taxes. Investing in coastal and harbor resilience is not merely a choice. It's an imperative for the sustainability of our communities, which maintain the value of our properties and the local economy. Excuse me. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and other climate-related challenges pose significant threats. By investing in resilient infrastructure, we not only protect our harbors from the impacts of climate change, but also safeguard the homes and livelihoods of the individuals who live in the town. So I ask, please continue to investing in coastal resiliency as outlined in the harbor plan. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
How you doing? Thank you. Derek Ferris, 17 Blaney Street. Appreciate all you do for the town. Yeah, I have no injuries as my friend Doug has from the last few storms, but again, I chose to live in this town truly because of its character and its waterfront beauty. My kids go to school here. We chose them to have this beach life and this waterfront life that is so important to us. It's truly a special place. When you travel the country and the world like I do, I kept coming back to want to live here, and there's a reason for that. So other communities on the water have waterfront not as nice as ours, but are getting federal monies, various grants to bulk up their infrastructure for, as storms are seem to be getting worse in my lifetime. As bad as I've seen it in this area was the last one. So we have to think proactively, not just get demolished and have to wait for FEMA to come in and save half the homes or things around here. Let's do what we can, hire grant writers, work with other communities, work with our legislature in DC. Whatever we have to do to help build this up, we need to do it now, not till it's too late. Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm all for it, though. It's about time we talk about it.
Ted Dooley, 58 Magnolia Road, Precinct 5, I believe. I am also here to comment on the resiliency of our coastline. I spent, last few weeks we've had a few storms. It's been interesting and fun to watch, but it's been the first time since I've lived in Swampscott where I've said, this is getting really serious. Yep. As entertaining as it is to see those waves pound against the seawalls, we all know that seawalls in this town are not always the most reliable thing. Current events have shown us that, whether it's weather or walls having other issues. We really need to do something more urgently to figure out how we're going to protect this town and Humphrey Street, especially in our harbor, from these continuing rising sea levels and stronger wave actions that are coming here. We have awesome restaurants coming to Humphrey Street. Every year it seems like there's a new award-winning restaurant investing in our town, hiring local workers, providing a lot of great times for everyone who lives in the area. And I think we need to show those restaurants that are investing in Humphrey Street, and as the master plan calls it, one of the economic corridors of our community, we need to show them that we're serious about protecting their investment as well from the tides and the ocean that is attracting so many people to come to Swampscott, but is causing more and more urgency for us to need to act to protect our community. So I would just ask that you consider how we can be more proactive on our resiliency efforts, how we can put more effort into ensuring that our town is protected from these storms and that our infrastructure is invested in, and take a serious look at some of the goals outlined in the harbor plan to figure out how we can really come together and address this issue proactively. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley.
Hey guys, Andrea, 15 Sheridan Road, and believe it or not, I'm not here to speak about King's Beach tonight. I want to also express my concern with our friends at the Harbor and Water Committee and the Swampscott Yacht Club, and urge the town to focus very heavily on the coastal infrastructure. I think that, we've been talking about sewers for the last 6 months, and the events of the last couple of weeks have really kind of shown an additional urgency, especially on things like seawalls, the railings along Kings Beach. All of this is severely lacking. And I believe that it sort of sheds a light on our basic infrastructure in general. And especially, given that the character that the town does have, I think many people in this town have moved here pretty much not exclusively, but mainly influenced by the proximity to the beaches. And I believe that it is really critical to invest in and protect this important asset, because it is truly what makes our town stand out on the North Shore. Additionally, I believe that sort of from a more practical standpoint, it's financially important to invest in the seawalls in general, because in real estate, we've been seeing insurance premiums spike, and we've been seeing more and more insurance companies not even issue policies in this area, even when it's not in a floodplain. So I do think that if we see continuous flooding events, eventually more and more of Swampscott is not going to be able to get a decent or affordable insurance policy. So I think that's something everybody should really be on the lookout for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. Excuse me. Mara Lau, Outlook Road. So on the website for Hadley, there are proposals, but unfortunately they're just on the Hadley reuse website. So I would really hope that that the town could move them to the main page so that they could be front and center for everybody to see. And I realize it will be whittled down, but even the ones that are not being whittled down, I think that they're important to read and for everybody to have access to them. I would also appreciate it if an email went out to town meeting members to say that they are there. Please read, please do the due diligence. I'd like to point out that Mary Ellen made a request regarding the, I'm going to get the town meeting one that passed for all of the plastics, right? So that request went out to town meeting members by email. So we got information about that. So people knew that there was information that they needed to research. It was a slam dunk, right? So people were not questioning at town meeting. They had information. They were prepared. Okay, so the proposals really quickly. They're vast in size. They include rooftop decks galore, easements to Linscott Park to get swooped in to use in their own structures for wedding venues and the like. Linscott Park is a town property, so please be mindful of this. And the size and scope of all of these was vast. 50 to 100 parking spots, 2 levels of parking, substantial additions off to the side that would include ballrooms, spas, rooftops, first floor restaurants, coffee, bakeries, retail stores, hot tubs, pools, which looks like it would be in right where the trash bins are at the moment, which made me chuckle, and possible inclusion of a significant retail space on 2 of them. So the comment has repeatedly been made that we are trying to bring small businesses that already exist and encourage small businesses. So please be mindful of the fact that if they're spending all of this money, they want the money to stay in their building. So that is where they'll want people to eat, and all of their incentives will be surrounded by that. So again, there was no mention of any community space because that was left off the RFP because the Peters didn't think that it needed to be put on there, even though it was something that was passed at town meeting. Pickleball, sound. We were concerned about the sound of pickleball at the last town meeting. The sounds that will emanate from this building will be vast. Please, the 6 people that are watching this, please read through these more thoroughly.
Thank you, Ms. Lau.
One more thing. Our high school will not last 113 years, as Hadley has. The building is going to need to be maintained. We are already using it as a public space for voting,
Thank you, Ms. Lau.
and it is getting tired.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Ms. Lau.
please keep all of these things in mind because
Thank you,
developers
Ms.
will
Lau.
continue
Thank you,
to
Ms. Lau.
just push it.
Thank you, Ms. Lau. We have some hands on teams. I think Ryan Hale.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
So is it in order to make comments on the upcoming warrant article, or are we waiting until we get to that part of the new business?
You can go ahead with your comment. You have 3 minutes, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. I haven't seen the draft of the articles, but I'd like to, as a member of so Brian Hale, 270 Paradise Road, Precinct 2, member of the Renewable Energy Committee and chair of the Capital Improvement Committee. I'd like to advocate that we add a warrant article, if there's not one already, that the town adopt the specialized stretch code. This is an important way for us to ensure high standards of resilient development in town. And since we have the expectation of a few large commercial or mixed-use properties coming up in town over the coming years. Adopting the specialized stretch code will ensure that those buildings are constructed in the most energy efficient and environmentally aware way that we know how right now. So I'm not sure if we're already planning to have an article on that topic. If so, that's great. And if not, I'd like to invite the select board to discuss that and to engage with the Climate Action Committee, the Renewable Energy Committee, the Capital Improvement Committee. We've got a lot of subject matter experts in town that are eager to share their knowledge to steer town meeting towards adopting this important piece of infrastructure and set of standards that will help Swampscott remain a leader in the Commonwealth for development at these high standards.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Thank you. Next up, we have Louis
We can't see names.
Struzzulo.
All right, everybody hear me?
Yep.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy New Year. My name is Louis Struzzulo. I live at 48 Gardner Road. My family and I spend nearly every day during the summer at Fisherman's Beach. My kids go to swim there. My wife and I spend time there with our friends and family. We often walk to Humphrey Street and appreciate all of the great businesses there. Our expanding business community along Humphrey Street has been impacted by the recent storm activity, which has been getting stronger and occurring more and more often. As a town, I really hope that we can be more proactive in investing in coastal resilience. I do know that Mrs. Spilios spoke of this before, right? That maybe that the town blocked on it, people in the town, on what we need. And along with beaches, which have been suffering, I believe that these walls are something that we need to investigate in, look into more about how to raise them, look into how to improve the walkways so that these streets also don't get damaged and houses don't get damaged that are there along with the businesses. I know that the main dock for all our boaters, which is something that's big for this town, that needs to be part of the program as well. So I guess I just want to be one of the voices to help urge that along with Kings Beach, Fisherman's Beach, looking into fix that we need to keep in mind that the water is rising and we can't fall behind, because if we fall behind, we will sink down with the water. So we need to keep this in mind, keep this on the top list. We are a seacoast, and we definitely need to look into the grants, especially for grants that have been worked on in Boston, which help protect a lot of the programs down there. And actually, these past two storms where they raised the seawall have shown that it has made a difference. So, Sean, I would really suggest to maybe look into what Boston may have done with these seawalls, the programs. Probably speak with the mayor down there, and maybe it's something that we could also invest in. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Truzzulo. Aaron Burdoff?
Hello, this is Aaron Burdoff from Evangelical Road, Precinct 5. I certainly don't want to repeat what all of the people have already stated in terms of climate resiliency. I just want to support that and with all those wonderful points about the urgency. And I do want to encourage the select board to look beyond just coming up with new things to look into. I want to urge us to seek action as soon as possible. We heard the urgency in everybody's voices tonight, and that's certainly important. And I also want to draw the select board's attention to what we're trying to do in terms of saving Kings Beach. The plans on the table right now that we'll pursue the community, the height, I want you to think about how high the sea level is going to have just on a normal day, let alone all the storms we've been seeing, and how often that area where it's going to put the TV treatments, the pipe extensions will be completely underwater sewerage and impact. So anyway, I appreciate you get moving on the climate resiliency and keep rolling.
Thank you, Mr. Burdoff. All right. Mr. Chairman, can I just, I think you mentioned to me that at an upcoming meeting, you intended to have a agenda item.
Yeah.
So maybe just now's a good time while people are here.
Yeah, so we will, on February the 7th, we have invited the Harbor and Waterfront Advisory Committee as well as the Climate Action Plan Committee to present to the Select Board. So I know the town administrator and myself are working with the chairs of those committees to pull together some presentation materials. So I urge all of you to attend and continue the advocacy for coastal resiliency, climate action. So I look forward to that conversation in 2 weeks. Thanks. All right, we'll move on. We're going to move on to discussion and possible vote on municipal elections and the Votes Act requirements that's Jared La Liberté, our town clerk.
Are we skipping the warrant too late?
We're gonna go there first, since this is one of the items within the warrant, Doug.
Really not. Topically, yes, but not really.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I did this presentation a few years ago for the majority of the board on I'm going to update about what's changed since the Votes Act for the new members, and quickly just talk about the local election and what I would like to do for early voting. In June of 2022, Governor Baker signed the Votes Act, which made a number of changes to the way, especially early voting and vote by mail, is done in the state of Massachusetts. Basically changing a bunch of deadlines and requiring early voting for all state elections and state primaries, allowing making it so it's the select board's decision to assign police detail, though this can be delegated. I'm not going to go into too much detail about any of that, but you have the PowerPoints. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to ask. But basically now, for the March 5th, it will be our first election, which will be the presidential primary, will be the March 5th election. We are required to have early voting on 6 hours on the weekend, and be open all business hours for early voting to the general public. For us, that basically means I will do 6 hours on Saturday the 24th, and then the hours that we are normally open to public, which is 8 to 5 Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and then 8 to 7 on 8 to 7 on Wednesdays, as the day town town hall is open late. That is the requirements under the state law, which obviously is what we default to. I'm currently working with the finance director for the upcoming budget to hopefully get a few more hours, to make sure that all hours are covered and hopefully expanded a little bit for the increased demand during the fall elections. But for now, that is the presidential primary, which does not need a vote, that defaults to what the state tells us to do. But for the local elections, there is no requirement still. However, given the climate and the desire of people to vote, I am here tonight to propose that we do allow early voting, which would be a vote of the select board, to allow early voting in person at the town office buildings. I have a couple different scenarios that I have worked up that have a few different options for you to mull over and decide which one you would, if any, you think would be appropriate for us. So basically, we can do up to 17 days beforehand. you can do up to 17 days beforehand and must end 2 days prior to. So that's the Friday prior to our elections because we have Tuesday elections. So what I've worked up, just because I think it's best to do it as close to the election as possible, because that's when it's most on people's minds. It's when candidates are really pushing and running and getting people out to vote. That's when people think about it, is when it's coming close to the election. I don't want to do it too far in advance just because I think it won't have as good of a turnout. So I'm proposing the Saturday the 20th to Friday the 26th. And basically I have sort of three...
Next slide.
Oh,
Please.
one more, Diane. Yeah, so option one would be basically the same thing we are doing for the presidential primary, with an extra day on Friday. Oh, sorry. Yeah, with an extra day on Friday, half a day on Friday, for people to vote. So that would be 6 days of early voting in about 48 hours. This would give people a number of different opportunities. Obviously, everyone's schedule is different, but having that Saturday for 6 hours, that also coincides with when we would be in anyways for the last day to register to vote. So my office would be there anyways, so that allows people to register to vote if they want to, as well as early vote, which they're able to do at the same time, as long as it's before the deadline to register. The second option would be some additional late night hours on Monday and Wednesday to allow additional opportunities for people who work a 9-to-5 job to get in for a chance to vote. So that's an additional 4 hours on top of that. And then finally would be a late night every night, basically running 8 to 8. As you can see, the money is nominally more expensive for them. I suggest option one, just from the standpoint of the clerk's office, in order to run this and to I think it's the most, yes, the money is not that much more, but also it is more sort of work on the clerk's office. I think number one would allow us to be open for when people can be there. It has the Saturday hours, it has the Friday hours, it has the normal hours we're there, which still allows us to do the other sort of legal obligations we have with securing the ballots at the end of the night, because we are still there for several hours after all that. I think that's the best option. We're still allowing the flexibility for people to get in on various days, and I think hopefully will help increase voter turnout, which we have seen dip over the past couple of years. This will be the first year we kind of do early voting for local elections, which I hope will, that along with an aggressive sort of information campaign to the public, will hopefully bring up and get more people to vote in what is a very important election, though a lot of people sometimes unaware of that, which my office has been trying to do more about lately, to make people aware of what's going on the ballot and make ease of access.
Jared, could I just ask a quick
Yes.
question? So the 2 days that the election, the early voting must end 2 days before the election?
Yes.
2 business days?
2 business days.
In either scenario?
Yes, no matter when, it has to end 2 days before, 2 business days before. So for us having a Tuesday election, it's the same as like a general election or anything else. It's the Friday.
Yep.
And I double checked with the state because the wording to me was a bit strange, 2 business days. I didn't even know if they meant 2 full business days. No, but it's going to end on the Friday by the end of the day.
Okay. Just because it would seem like that Saturday before voting might be, you know.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure you can't do it.
Yeah, I asked just to make sure, but yeah,
Okay.
no.
Should we do a motion on that, or what?
He might be.
Yeah, I'm all set with my, so I'd like if the chair would entertain a motion to approve one of the 3 options that were put in front of you.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Yeah, questions.
I have a couple questions. On these different scenarios, are you forecasting, or do you have any idea what type of an increase you can get by?
I'm not sure. Other clerks I've talked to kind of anecdotally tell me a couple of percentage points, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but given we're typically around 13 to 15%, I'm hoping it gets up to more like 20% by this, but that's a best guess at best, Mary Ellen.
So, but I'm looking at this, and on the, if you're recommending option one, it looks like you close at 5 o'clock each day except for Wednesday. And I'm just thinking, why don't we just go to option 3? Because the difference in price is what, $500? And it would give people an opportunity to come in and vote after work. That gives it to them until 8 o'clock. To me, that seems like, seems to me like the best option.
It's got definitely the most time for people to vote. I agree with you, Mary Ellen. Additional money, it's not much in my eyes, but my budget is rather tight, so I'm trying to just be cognizant as, for my own office's budget. Now, like I say in the cost variance slide, sometimes people work for senior tax work-off, but I plan that no one takes senior tax work-off credit, just so I know the most I will spend in that time period, so these numbers may actually go down a bit if more people take, which I do have some people, but I don't ever want to assume that people are going to take senior tax work-off credit. So it's kind of tough to know.
I also heard you say that it might be a little bit difficult to staff all these hours in option 3.
That is always a problem. I feel like I can, but again, I don't know. Early voting comes with a little bit more. I'm not free that. A lot of my poll workers book out specifically election days, like at the start of the year. Like I get emails at the start of the year, like, what are my elections this year? With something new coming up, I'm not always positive. Like it will be staffed, even if it's my office staffing it and not volunteers. Like we will have it staffed for whatever you decide, but it's always a kind of toss-up. I have unfortunately lost a few poll workers over the years. 2 years I've been here just because of age or retirement from poll working, but we have been getting more and more. Jody Watts and I have been working to increase our thing, so I think I'll be fine, but you never know.
So I'm squarely with Mary Ellen on this. I just think this is a fundamental cornerstone that we should be, as a community, make it unequivocally clear that we are going to maximize the amount of time, and we're going to make it as easy as humanly possible for every single resident to come out and vote. In a few minutes, I think we're going to talk about some more in articles, and we'll talk more about town voting. Jared's right, 13% in our last election. 16% average over the last 17 years, or 7 years.
Right, but the question is, like, is being open a couple more nights late really, is that really what's going to move the needle? Or is it really, we should be thinking about something different if we really are focused on?
Well, in a few minutes, we're going to think about something different, because we're going to do it, but I'm saying for me, as to hours, yes, this is an and. Since we do very little to begin with now, and this is solely within our control, I agree with Mary Ellen. I think it's a great use of funds, and if we got to throw more resources at it, this is exactly. Ron DeSantis paid $1,500 per vote in Iowa. We can spend $2,600 to keep the polls open in Swampscott. So, I just do. I just think this is we've underinvested as a society in this. So, I think it's vitally important.
So, Peter, I agree with you. I have mentioned a few times to Jared that if his budget doesn't have enough funds in it, we'll cover it, and we will literally make sure that this can happen.
Yeah, I think, Doug, you make a good point. Like, even $500, if spending it will move the needle, but I guess, let's see. It can't hurt. And if it doesn't, then we consider other options next year. We'll have a little bit more of a data. Right?
Yeah, I agree
Hopefully,
with you, Katie.
To see if it did work. So maybe it will be helpful going forward to understand. So I think option 3, as Mary Ellen stated.
Yeah, I want to make it as easy as possible to vote. I know that there are many days where I'm out of the house before 7 o'clock, and I'm not home until after 5 o'clock. And having those late nights where I can stop by town hall and easily cast a ballot in a local election is certainly helpful to me, and is certainly going to be helpful to those who are working or just juggling busy lives. So I want to have as many hours of early voting as possible, and that's within our ability to craft policy. So I would be voting for, Schedule 3 to have as many hours as possible. So I would entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve Schedule number 3, which sets forth a total number of early voting hours of 58 hours.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Jared, if there could be an over-communication of these hours, I know that's what you're striving for and you continue to always strive for, but if we can get them on the town website, if we could, Sean, you could direct town staff to just be emailing it out, having it in the newsletter, every single avenue we can, and then including the days of voting, reposting it to Facebook. I know Diane has been keeping tabs on that and making sure that people know day of that it's happening. That would be helpful.
I will work with everyone in town to make sure it goes out as wide as humanly possible. Already working with Jody on the newsletter. I work with Diane, and then also the robocalls, the sign, everything else I can think of to get it out. And I will put it up tomorrow, up on the website, so it's out as early as humanly possible, and then continue to bring it more to the front, because it brought to my attention in the past. I'm very well aware of the website, but not everyone is, so I try to keep it on the front page as much as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know the superintendent recently sent out like a release of information related to budget. Like, it's great that we see school stuff through the superintendent because that's her job, but also, she's a town employee too, so maybe she could be putting some of this through Parent Square, things like that, so.
Sure. Yep,
parents
anytime we can cross-populate.
It's a great idea. Thank you, Jared. All right. In that same vein, we're going to move on. Discussion and possible vote on proposed changes to municipal elections. And I believe this is going to go to Mr. Spelios.
Thanks. I think this is actually also taking us into our warrant article a little bit, but this is coincidental that Jared's here and now I'm talking because we're talking about very similar topics here. And tonight, there's been a lot of talk in the community over the years about just things that we can do better in terms of voting, things that we can just do better both mechanically in town. For example, things like we have our town meeting immediately after our town election. So therefore, you have brand new select board members, brand new town meeting members, brand new planning board members who 3 weeks after being sworn in are now in charge of a town meeting and handling a warrant that many of them had nothing to do with since they weren't in office at the time. So there's some technical changes. Tonight I want to, and in our articles, with the help of Lauren Goldberg at KP Law, there's 2 suggested warrant articles that are both related. A little bit technical, but really it's about the goal of increasing turnout in municipal elections. You want to put that up? Diane, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's almost like Jared and I worked on the slide together. So this just gives you a flavor of the last 7 years of municipal elections and the turnout in Swampscott. I'm going to talk more about turnout later on, but just to start with this. 1 out of 6 registered voters in Swampscott voted in 2022. 1 out of 6 registered voters, which is, by the way, 1 out of 8 people in our town when we take all people. That's who's making all the decisions. That's who's actually deciding who sits here, who sits at town meeting, who sits on the planning board. I had a conversation earlier with someone about the zoning board. We appoint the zoning board, right? But only 1 out of 6 residents are the ones making these votes. And it's especially difficult now that we're also losing local media, right? And so when we talk about how to get word out, social media is increasingly where you get word out, but social media is not nearly accurate or predictable or consistent. And I think there are some issues with relying on social media and the goodwill, when it is goodwill, of others just to spread words about it. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in our warrant article, there's I'm suggesting after talking with the town moderator, we had a good meeting with the town clerk and the town administrator and town council about some technical changes, but also some not so technical changes. The first is going to be changing the order of events so that the town election happens after the annual town meeting. This will be consistent with most communities. If not, Marblehead's an example of that, who does it right. Their election is weeks after their annual town election. That allows just for more, I think, continuity through town meeting, and doesn't cause a lot of distraction, frankly, of bringing new members in and doing things just before town meeting. So number two, next one, is to change our town election date. Tuesdays are a bygone era of when we had Tuesdays as the day to do it, and you can read many accounts of why Tuesdays were ever picked by anyone across the country to do voting. Monday was too soon after the weekend. You needed to give farmers a chance to tend to the farms, and so therefore Mondays were never seemed to be a good day because they had to make up for lost time, and so Tuesdays were it. Before us, anyways, in the warrant article is a proposal to have elections over 2 days, both weekend days, and would be the first consecutive Saturday and Sunday in June. The important parts are to make it more available for individuals and that do not work normal hours. Some work 7 days a week, some work Saturdays, some don't work Saturdays. We also want to take in consideration religious affiliations. And so therefore, instead of choosing one weekend day, it's to have them open both weekend days. I think this sends a really clear message that this is a priority for us, that this is important for us. And it's not going to replace the need to get out the word about elections and talk about elections and encourage elections, but it's certainly going to start sending a very strong message about it. Number three is exactly what Jared was talking about, but what I'm going to propose and what's in the warrant article is actually codifying the requirement that for local elections, the clerk does not need to keep coming back every year to the select board to say, do you want to do early elections? I think it's an important enough topic that this shouldn't be a debatable thing. Early elections should be in our town charter, and we should make it very difficult for anyone to restrict the availability of elections. And so therefore, in essence, what Jared proposed tonight, in which I really appreciate his strength and integrity about voting and how strong he feels about it, I'm suggesting that we put this in charter so that therefore it is the rule, it is the law in Swampscott unless a charter change in the future is approved by town meeting, is approved by the legislature, and someone goes through that extreme hardship to start scaling back voting opportunities. And then four is on this one here is a technical thing. And so if we have a town meeting study committee, and there's been conversations, and I've had conversations with the moderator about some just interesting things that happen in our town. One of the byproducts of not having high turnout is at times we don't have a large number of candidates. And increasingly in the recent years, in the 7 years that I just showed you, we have an increase every year of vacancies on town meeting, which, great, so you easily solved. I'm going to write in my niece. I'm going to write in my neighbor. I'm going to write in my wife. But interestingly enough, what's happened is increasingly people don't even know that they're elected because they didn't volunteer to be written in. And so we've actually had the situation where people have said, I didn't ask to be elected and to do it. So we've had conversations, talked with KP Law about what are creative ways to try to synergize this to both address the issue where people are being written in with one vote that don't want to be written in, but at the same time try and activate town meeting to help us fill the memberships. And so what this is proposing is if you are today deciding to run for town meeting, you have to go out and get a nomination paper from the town clerk, and you have to get 10 residents in your precinct to sign it. That's the prerequisite to get on the ballot. For townwide offices, it's 50, but for town meeting members, it's 10. And so this is proposing having the same thing for write-in ballots. So if you are written in by 10 people, then you can get in because it's the same. So what happens if you still end up with vacancies? What it does is it throws it to the precincts. Each precinct then is the one that's deciding and voting on and soliciting as a precinct to find members to join them. And so it kind of calls the citizens to be activists, to go out there and say, hey, we have holes in our membership here. We're going to go out and we're going to find the people to fill these. We're going to go to my neighbor and say, hey, I know you're new to this town, but this is what town meeting does. Or, hey, I know many years ago you did this, but you got busy with kids and you got off it. Can you get back on it and do these things? But really the goal here is not only to make sure that people get written in, that want to get written in, but also that we start activating town meeting members that do show up and that do volunteer their times to help us fill these voids, because that creates greater buy-in by all town meeting members when they're part of the solution of filling those vacancies. So those vacancies aren't filled somewhat arbitrarily, that they're filled with some discussions and some forethought by individual town meeting members. So that's the first tranche of what I'm going to call, I guess, voting reforms and things that I think are important here in Swampscott, but make no mistake about it, you can go and check the voting turnout in any community in Massachusetts. You can go in Kansas, you can go in Nebraska, you can go anywhere, and I think you're going to find the same trends. This topic is not just about making sure that people feel represented in town government. It's not about just making sure the best people run or the best people win. It's not about just Swampscott. This is certainly a bigger topic, but I think every town like Swampscott needs to start doing their part to advance these conversations. Next slide, please. So procedurally, just so everyone knows, this is a charter change. So what does that mean? It means that town meeting has to approve it, has to go to the legislature has to approve it, and the governor has to approve it. That's just how Massachusetts does things with charter changes, so it's not an easy process, and it will take some time. Next slide, Diane, please. And so what does that mean is it's certainly not going to affect 2024. The language in the warrant article specifically makes clear that its effective date would be the earlier of January 1 of 25, or the date, the later of January 1, 25, or the date the legislature approves the home rule petition. So it wouldn't, in any circumstance, take effect before the municipal election in 2025, assuming the legislature has taken action on this by that time. It's hard to tell how quick they'll take action or not on these changes. They have approved somewhat similar home rule petitions for other communities, but again, every town kind of is a bit different. So that's the first warrant article. Next slide, please. The second warrant article is one that I want to go back to data again for a minute, because I started by talking about what's the percentage of Swampscott turnout is, and how embarrassingly low that is, and how it's not getting better, it's getting worse. But I also want to talk about trends, and I also want to talk about where I believe some of our problems, and I think many believe some of our problems are being exacerbated, and where some of the fixes are. So if you look at just Swampscott voting records, these stats are Swampscott. In federal elections for the last 50 years, Swampscott has fallen off about 2.3%. Not bad, over 50 years, basically, if you kind of smooth out the trends of it, federal election turnout by Swampscott registered voters has only gone down by 2.3%. Next slide, please. State elections, a little bit worse. Over that same 50-year period, we've fallen off by about 8%. Again, not unusual. I think very easily we could replace Swampscott with Marblehead. We could replace Marblehead with Louisville, Kentucky. We could, I believe these are trends that are not anomalies for us. But the one I really want to talk about is the next slide, Diane, which is local elections in the same period. And local elections have fallen off disproportionately. And I find that hugely ironic, because local elections are about local government, and local government is where most people have the greatest opportunities to touch and feel the impacts of government, have the greatest impact to influence what government does for them. And every day of their lives, they experience the results of the decision that we make in municipal government. So it's disappointing and concerning. The drastic decline has happened. But it's even more concerning here in Swampscott, because especially over the last 10 years, we've probably had one of the most active 10 years. We've probably done more things in the last 10 years than we did in 40 years before that. But yet in this 10-year period, our voting has declined and has accelerated the decline. So even in a town that has been so active and so involved, so many different things, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about resiliency, we're talking about schools, it's amazing the number of topics. Go to other communities and you're not going to see anything nearly as dynamic. But even in a town like us, that has so many committees with so many specialized people taking part and volunteering their professional services for us, and doing all the things we're doing, we're still declining, and at an accelerated basis. The decreased in voter participation and anemic voter turnout at the local level has created a dangerous void in our understanding and appreciation for the role of a democratically elected government. Instead, it leaves in place people losing faith in our government, being cynical, being skeptical, and losing their belief in democracy, due primarily to the fact that all they see and all they witness is what they see on social media and in the media about political gridlock, inactivity, and extreme partisanship that has overtaken Washington, D.C. and many state capitals. In light of this reality, it's essential that we welcome more voters locally and get more people involved locally to help educate people and to help give them real-life experiences about the importance of democratically elected government. In the coming weeks, and you can go to the next slide, please. You can go two. You can go two. Next one. Yep, right there. In the coming weeks, a group will be talking with juniors and seniors in the high school and having a discussion with them in the month of February about whether or not Swampscott should be added to the list of growing number of communities asking the state for permission to allow 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds to vote in local elections. I believe it's critical that we invite them into this dialogue and that we have the conversation. We have the opportunity to have these young people make up for the irresponsible problems that us old people have created by not voting. In talking to these young people, we're going to be doing it in classrooms. We're going to be doing it while they're surrounded by advisors, by history teachers, by civic teachers, by professionals that can help them be introduced into the importance of voting. When, where, why, and how. So they don't leave high school without ever being part of the experiment. They're actually in high school being schooled about the importance of the experiment, and they have active involvement while they're here in our school system so that they can come to appreciate why is it important. Why you should want to vote in a local election because you don't want the AP biology class cut. Why you need to vote in a local election because you are sick and tired of the Phillips Park field having holes in it. Why you want to vote in a local election because you are sick and tired of the fact that your street has never been paved. The issues go on, and they are real-life examples that get buy-in. When we see results, when we see the impacts of government, we believe in government more. The problem is the only place people are seeing it right now is at the local level, but with the decrease of voter turnout and the decrease of local papers, we aren't witnessing it as much. So people have now associated with government with do nothing. And do nothing means voting doesn't matter. And that is the exact opposite of the truth. So the second warrant article before us both allows 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in Swampscott elections. Point of interest, 1972, it actually took a referendum. The legislature didn't do it. It took a referendum to get the legislature to decrease it from 21 years old voting age to 18 years old. It passed overwhelmingly, not surprisingly. And then the second part about this is, hey, if we're going to tell you you can vote, you can also run. We all know examples of kids, students that actually sit on committees. We've appointed them to committees that have done more work than many adults on committees that, you know, you're thinking of who I'm thinking of, and we know. We also know not every kid, but we also know that not every adult. But we don't restrict that, do we? And we certainly can come up with examples there. So, and next slide, please, I'm sorry. I mentioned this is going to join other communities. In a second, I'll talk about the procedure. The procedure, just like the other warrant article, requires us to go to the legislature, requires us to get permission to do this. But we're going to be joining communities like Boston, Somerville, Concord, Acton, Northampton, Southborough that have all already petitioned the legislature to allow this to happen. There's also a number of bills pending in the legislature that, for statewide, asking the voting age to be changed. So why would we do this if the legislature hasn't done it? And why would we just add our voice to another list and have it another bill and ask our state rep to champion and our state senator? Because I think it matters. I think
so those haven't been approved yet?
They haven't been approved. And so there's no community in Massachusetts right now that can vote below 18. There are Brattleboro, Vermont, you can. There are other communities across the country, but those haven't been approved. I think it's important that that list gets longer. I think it's important that the legislature, again, we're a home rule state, and the legislature keeps really tight control on what municipalities can do on their own. I think it's vitally important that we work to add to this list and show the importance and show that we want to do it. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned this requires town meeting approval in a home rule petition by the legislature. The last thing I want to leave with, because I think it's really important, is to repeat what I said earlier about what we're going to be doing in the month of February. I really appreciate the superintendent, I appreciate the principal in the high school, and their eagerness and excitement to engage in this dialogue and to invite the dialogue into the high school in the month of February to ask the kids, to have a conversation with the students, those 16 and 17-year-olds that we're talking about. What do you think about it? What are the pros? What are the cons? And then also use that as an opportunity to start talking about what government does, right? To contextualize the decision so that when we get to town meeting, they have informed us, they've given us some feedback. We're working on it such that the feedback and the questions and the comments by students will be available and shared publicly so that people will be able to perhaps watch some of that experiment in democracy and that discussion about democracy that will happen through the month of February. With that, I'm happy to take questions, but that is all I have.
Thanks, Peter. Questions from the board? Comments? I mean, I have a few. So, Peter, you had posted the voter turnout for the last several elections, and you didn't read those numbers, and I just want to spell those out because I looked those up today as well. 2023 voter turnout 13.8%. 2022, voter turnout 16.2%. 2021, voter turnout 19%. 2020, voter turnout, local elections 17%. 2019, voter turnout 22%. 2018, voter turnout 9.5%. Average for 6 years, 16.3%. So you have 1 out of every 6 voters making these decisions. And I think just by the fact that the select board is having this conversation tonight, we're bringing voting, to the fore. So I really encourage these, these opportunities to say, hey, what can we do as a town? What can we do as a Commonwealth to make it easier to vote early, make it easier to vote on election day? But also, how do we engage our young citizens? How do we encourage them to be involved? The earlier you vote, the more likely you are to vote as an adult. Some of my earliest memories are going into our local polling place in Louisiana with my parents and voting and using a variety of really old voting machines with knobs, and I thought it was just completely fascinating. But it set me on a trajectory where, as soon as I turned 18, I was so excited to vote, in local, state, and national elections. And that's just my experience. So, Peter, certainly thank you for putting that presentation together, and I'd certainly be interested to hear from others.
I mean, I think it's not surprising that all of us likely have a similar story as David, or we wouldn't be active in local politics, right? I mean, obviously we had something that each affected us in a way that brought us here to this table. And for the folks sitting here, you all, I'm sure as well, have some sort of personal touch point that makes local politics important to you. Whether it is just you understand its significance in your daily life and your family and your community, or you have a personal connection, and it's always been important. One of the things I can appreciate that's on the table is the Saturday and Sunday voting, because one of the things that my husband and I always strive to do is to take our kids with us to vote, to understand that in order to be a member of this community, you must be an active member of this community, and that means you've got to put in some work. And voting day is actually probably the easiest day to do the work, right? Because you just go in and you have an opinion. But it's part of the contract you have to be a member of this town. Yep. And anything we can do to sort of ignite that flame earlier, to understand that these young citizens are not just kids who are told what to do, but have a voice in the process. I think it's a fantastic social experiment that will provide us, I think, with a lot of very interesting data, and is well worth the push to see, to become part of these communities, to see what kind of wonderful things come from it. So I wholeheartedly agree that this is a worthwhile cause that we can get behind.
So I think it is really interesting why people are choosing to not vote. And, I've said it during the campaign, and many people know that I've lived in Eastern Bloc countries for a long time. So I've lived in areas where people didn't have the opportunity to vote. And it always amazes me why people don't go out and exercise their privilege to vote. And I often ask people why, and I'm still interested in knowing why, but recently I did ask somebody why they didn't vote, and he actually said, do you really want me to vote if I don't follow anything and I don't really know what's going on? Do you really want my vote? And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. Maybe I don't want your vote if you don't follow things. So, but I think changing the times and trying to make it as convenient as possible, and maybe running some transportation for seniors or people who, don't have transportation, things like that, that might make a big difference too. I think the thought of 16 and 17-year-olds voting, I work with many 16 and 17-year-olds, so I would have to really think that one through and get a better understanding of it. But I would like to know more from people why they choose not to vote. So.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Doug, penny for your thoughts?
It's hard to top all that, voting's great.
Just end there. Voting's great.
So tonight, what we're really doing here is deciding whether or not something, this segues into the warrant, right? Deciding whether or not it's going to be on the warrant, and then we have a subsequent meeting to talk about whether or not we're actually, where the select board is supporting it, right? Is that the process?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think these are all great things to, have on the warrant to kind of get to the meat of it. I'm not necessarily sure about one or two of them, how I feel about it. I need to think about it a little bit more. The 16 and 17-year-old voting and running for office, definitely support that. But a couple others I just want to think through a little bit more. But appreciate the effort in putting this together and raising the questions, for sure. It does raise another question for me, which is, we solicited a lot of other charter change information from committees, and I'm not really sure, was this part of the only thing that came of this, or those are still outstanding?
No, this is independent of it. This is specifically limited just to election stuff as a policy thing, not really the holistic charter change. I don't know where that stands in terms of reviewing that.
Yeah. I need to work on that with the town administrator.
Okay.
I just have a follow-up to something Mary Ellen said, if that's okay. And I don't want to sort of go too far down this rabbit hole, but I sort of just want to touch on the stigma of being an educated voter. And I think everybody's definition of being an educated voter is different, right? And, you want to, some people think you have to know the candidates, you have to know the issues, you have to know, a certain amount of knowledge to get out there and vote. And I sort of have a chicken and the egg thought when I come to this, which is, maybe that's true initially, that you hesitate to vote because you don't have the information, but maybe voting in that election gets you to become a more informed voter going forward. Maybe you feel like when your vote counts, or you feel like you have ownership in it, it puts you in a better position in future elections to be a more active participant, to be more engaged, to understand how your vote meant something. Maybe it inspires people to become more active. So that is why I don't hesitate to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. I am not concerned they vote the same as me. It would be great if they didn't, because we'd have 100,000 more ideas on the table to discuss. And I'm not putting those words in your mouth. I'm just saying that as an observation to me. I think it's exciting to allow them the space to think they have a voice, and then now what can they do with it? And I don't want us to stifle the idea that they can't have it because they have to meet some sort of threshold of what it means to be an informed voter. So.
Thanks, Cody. I totally agree with you, but I appreciate that idea is out there, right? But I just, and we've all said it jokingly, well, the ill-informed voter is the one that doesn't agree with me. But I mean, that's the simplest thing that you see most times, right? But the truth is we need people to vote, because this isn't about any specific politics or party or belief system. What it's about is that buy-in to the system is what we are losing, which is why we are literally talking about democracy versus autocracy. It's literally why we're talking about it. The fact that we're talking about it is crazy, but we're talking about it because people have lost faith in the system. And they've lost faith in the system because they've stopped seeing government do things. And they've lost their understanding of what government can do. And the generations that saw big action by government or specific actions by government, they're aging. And we now are bringing up, and then we have the middle tier, and we've been living in this gridlock. And now we're all bringing up a next generation who are also going to live in this if we don't actively recognize that we've got to correct the system to whatever end politically. It doesn't matter if you're right, you're left, you're center, you're for, you're against. It's not the point at all. This is simply about a good functioning democracy and at the local level where we're seeing the biggest drop-off, which is staggering. It's the easiest one to hook people into government. Because Katie's absolutely right, and David. Like, I'm here because my mom was the president of the PTO, right? I never thought about it when I was young, but now that I hear, I'm like, why would I ever do this? And I'm like, oh my God, because my mom was the first one to raise her hand and volunteer for things, right? You know, Maura, your kids are going to run for office. Why? Because you care, and like you show up things. Your kids, I mean, they see you, right? And I know your kids, and so they're going to, right? And so they're going to. But I mean, that's the beauty of it. They see that, but that's not everywhere. And increasingly, just without local papers talking about government and without that connection to government, that, oh my God, I don't like the size of my trash barrel, I can affect the change, right? That kind of direct connectivity. It's not going to change the world, but it's going to change that person's perspective. And that's a building block that we're losing. So I appreciate everybody's willingness to entertain the conversation. I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have in February with the students, and I'll report back, and I think we're doing it in a format that will allow it to be shared, because I'm really excited about it. I mean, I've asked my 16-year-old, and he started at, why would you ever let me vote? And he's slowly evolving to saying, hey, actually, especially today because he had to put his cell phone in a locked pouch at the high school, he's actually thinking he might want to be on school committee. So he can get his cell phone back, but that's the point, right? We've been engaging that and saying, well, you don't like putting your cell phone in that pouch. How is that decision made? It was made by the superintendent, not the school committee, but who hires the superintendent? Who does the superintendent report to? And this is politics, it's government. And so anytime we can engage them, I'm excited about it. And so thank you very much for considering the topic.
Thanks. All right. So we're going to move on now to opening of the special town meeting warrant of March 11, 2024, including review, discussion, and votes on articles for inclusion in the warrant. Sean?
Great, thank you, David. This is the first draft of special town meeting warrant. Pete Kane is online here, and he's going to step us through the table of contents, and we can talk a little more about the board's desires to include any of these or additional articles. Okay.
Good evening, board.
Good evening, Pete.
Good evening, Pete.
You can see the screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so you have a printout of the drafted articles. The list here is all of the possible articles that I've been putting in for consideration. So the first four are financial articles. We have the amending the appropriations for FY24 related to allocations to Chapter
No, we don't need to talk language today. Let's just look at the article.
Okay, so we'll just go quickly through here, and then if you have any details, certainly let me know. So it's amending appropriations related to Chapter 70. Article 2 is a transfer for free cash related to a homeless foster care transportation request. Article 3 is another approval for transfer of free cash related to collective bargaining agreement. This is specifically for the Public Works Union. Article 4 is a transfer of free cash request for general Glover House preservation.
Okay.
Article 5.
Wait, Pete.
Article 4?
Let's stop there and let's kick it to the board for questions and comments.
So my understanding is that the first two articles are the school articles that we previously didn't do at the fall special, and because we specifically said we were going to do it as special. Okay. Thank you.
And those numbers, those dollar amounts, the 186,001 in Article 1 and 26,445, those are set in stone.
Those are set. Our Director of Finance and Administration and the school Finance Director have been reconciling those numbers, and I would expect that, if there's any adjustment, we can make that. But right now, those are the numbers that they've agreed to.
Okay, thanks.
Wait, so what is the number on there? 31? This is,
186,001, number 1. It's up in the text.
all right,
It's in the comment, Mary Ann.
got it.
Okay. Can I just ask that
Is that a moving target?
I don't think so. I think it's a fixed sum.
Okay.
But let's confirm, make sure, but I think it's a fixed sum, Mary Ellen. That's my understanding. If we can just, sometimes the nitty-gritty of these kind of gets lost into the last minute, but sponsored by things, or that would, for example, I'm just going to use the example where Mr. Lehman talked about the one about the historical funds, but it says sponsored by. It's already in here, but none of us know why, and again, it's a suggestion right now, meaning who sponsored it, right? And so, for example, this one says sponsored by the Finance Committee, but I don't think the Finance Committee is going to sponsor it. The Finance Committee is going to move it. That's not sponsoring it. That's different, right?
Sure.
I believe it's either the Select Board, the Town Administrator, or the School Committee is probably going to be the one sponsoring this because it's a school article, and then the Finance Committee moves it, but they typically aren't the ones that sponsor articles. And so just, if we can just focus on those sooner so that we're not rushing
Understood.
on whatever night.
Yep.
Okay, so can we just have the school committee sponsor Articles 1 and 2?
Actually, frankly, this is something I'm happy to recommend as well.
I think that's great.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Can I just ask that, we just ask the school department to read the comments in 1 and 2 and make sure the comments are accurate from their standpoint, just because there's no way I would know what they're, and just since it's school-related things.
Any questions, comments on 3 or 4?
So then who would sponsor Article 4?
I'm sorry, say that, Katie?
So then who would sponsor Article 4?
Thank you. Can we talk about that article for a second? Sure. I mean, I'm interested, so I heard what the source is, but I'm not sure what the revolving account is for historical, so I guess I just need some more background on that. And I heard something that I just didn't know was true, and I don't have an opinion at the moment, but fines don't necessarily accrue. We collect fines all the time. They don't go to the building department or go to the zoning board when there's fines there. So
Goes to the general fund.
So, yeah, they go to the general fund. So I just want to understand two things. I just want to understand when a fine comes into a commissioner board, the Concom has a fine. Does it go to their revolving account?
Yeah.
Does historical, does it go to a revolving account? I mean, I'm just making sure I understand that. And then the second thing I just do want to understand is if it goes to the revolving account and then it's their money, that committee's money, that is what it is. I don't need to understand it. But if it doesn't, and this is discretionary, then I guess then I would ask the question, what are we using the money for? Because then it feels like we are taking something that's in the general fund and moving it for a purpose. But if it's something that goes into a revolving account automatically, because that's the way it works, then that's a totally, I'm good with that.
This does not. This is the first time I think we've actually levied a fine and yeah, and so I had a conversation with the chair of the Historic Commission about, frankly, the amount of the fine a few months ago. I was kind of surprised. Frankly, it was just $25,000. I thought it should have been significantly higher.
But that's not
I know
that's not the conversation.
But I guess I would recommend that the Historic Commission be allowed to utilize these funds to advance some of the priorities of the Historic Commission. It seems as though we have a commission that has a lot of historic properties that we have to take care of. And
No, I appreciate that. Can you just focus? I just want, if you can just answer the technical question for me, which is, what is the Historical Commission's revolving account, and what is the source that funds that? If there's a revolving account,
I believe it's 5,000. I think
Amy
it's
has her
donations.
hand up, I
Yep.
think.
I can't.
Yep.
No, I'm not asking what the cap is, guys. I'm asking
said so.
I'm asking the mechanics of.
These are two different things that John brought up.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
The established purpose of the Historical Commission revolving fund was for them to do donations and fundraising, and to use those for smaller items such as plaques, and other, landmarks around town.
Right. So that
And it's
that was my understanding, because I remember there was a conversation less than a year ago where we talked about the amount of that, the cap on that, because they wanted to do more robust fundraising. And that's consistent with my memory of it. So just, again, I don't know what it's, but now for the first time, we're taking something that would otherwise fall to the general fund, like building violation fees, like blighted property fees, like zoning penalties, and we're putting it over there, which again, I may be totally fine with. It feels like we should understand, then, are we setting a new policy that every fine from the Historical Commission is going into this revolving account? Because up to now, there's never been a fine, and it's been donations, used for donations, and I just want to be clear on that, because it feels this is.
Yeah, I haven't made any.
There's two separate things here, I believe. John can add to this, but I don't think, and correct me if I misunderstood, but it wasn't necessarily that the 25,000 was, you were asking for it to go into the revolving fund. I think the language here was about the 25,000, and then you were suggesting something additional about the cap on the revolving fund. Where this 25,000 goes per se, I didn't necessarily understand that to be going into the revolving fund. Is that?
Yeah, I don't believe it's going to the revolving fund either. It was a request to actually allocate these funds.
So I apologize if I have conflated the two topics.
It's.
But I'm glad we're having the conversation.
That's correct. Excuse me. This particular amount is already spoken for, if approved, to go towards Glover, so it would not need to go into the revolving fund unless temporarily. We are looking at our bylaws as a separate item, and in conjunction with that, the cap on the revolving fund, because this is the first fund that we've ever levied in the history of the commission, we don't have a mechanism for putting this money into historic preservation, which is something that we're going to propose for approval outside of this. So our feeling is that fines of this sort, and we hope to not collect too many, we hope that we improve compliance, but to the extent that we collect a fine, we want that money to go towards historic preservation. So that's something that we will be proposing in conjunction with a bylaw revision. We're looking at a number of things separate from this. And that's why this particular provision addresses only Glover, because that's something that's happening right now.
But do you have an actual invoice? Like, where does the money actually go? Do you have an invoice that it's going towards, or like, why wouldn't it?
We have a number of expenses depending on the direction. If we should move the building intact or take it apart, that sort of thing. So it will go towards that.
Amy can just answer. Amy, you still there? Just answer how this.
We actually have some invoices, Amy. I know. Yeah, one is for the Macris. The research that was done on the history by an expert. So that's one that comes to mind. Amy would certainly know of others.
But you really mean proposals for work moving forward, because it can't be for invoices of things already accrued because there was no appropriation.
Correct.
So you're talking, I think Mary Ellen's more specifically meaning like proposals for, have you already identified a scope of work, a proposal for whatever it is for $25,000 or 5 of them that equals $25,000 that has specifically been identified that the Historical Commission, if this money was here tomorrow, would sign the proposal and say, go do this $25,000 worth?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Certainly the expenses will well exceed that. We have fundraising going on separately.
You know,
but yeah, if you're looking for a specific invoice.
There's a scope of work I received last week for $29,000 from Structures North to support an RFP to preserve the elements of the building.
Well,
so that, you know, that's certainly something that could be supported through the use of some of these dollars.
But why wouldn't we just put an article in to increase the revolving account, and then that money just goes into the revolving account, and then there's no...
I think there's an urgency in terms of time. You know, the property is under some pressure for redevelopment, and so I think there's a sense that the Historic Commission, the Glover, we're looking to allocate $25,000 of fine revenue to support efforts to.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just wondering mechanically how does this how it gets moved, like where it sits, because you can't just. Huh?
Functionally, the accounting for this would be to appropriate additional monies into the Historical Commission General Fund line. From there, that appropriation would grant them the ability to spend it from the general fund.
Okay.
And then, because as John said earlier, it's like because the $25,000 that came in can't really be credited until the DOR certification next year. So you're really taking free cash right now to kind of seize that money now, but then kind of recouping it later.
But
so that's just technical.
I think I don't know that Mary Ellen and I agree on the conclusion, but this does seem like a lot of mental gymnastics going on here, and it seems, and again, something that I haven't seen before. So it's we're going to put free cash to pay something in, and we're going to put it in their general operating line item, which I haven't heard used before as a concept. And we're not going to put it in their revolving account, but maybe we're going to change their revolving account such that they're now going to collect fines, and we haven't talked about that for about 2 seconds. I'm just saying there just seems to be so I guess
that was a confusion.
It's here. So we just
First time I heard that we were doing that was tonight at this meeting.
Well, I mean,
so
I don't think that was suggested.
No, but again, you've put this in here, the draft. So I'm just. No. I think this needs some side discussions, and so that way our next meeting when we're talking about this, we actually can hone in. And because if this is kind of like a capital article, right, it's a report or something like that, we would be, I'll play, Mary Ellen always asks certain questions like, okay, where was this on the capital plan, what specifically it's going for, what's it allocating for, none of those are dispositive questions, it's just background information that we typically would want to know. If conversely, this is something where we're saying, and it doesn't seem like it is, we want a policy change that we're going to increase the cap on the Historical Commission's revolving account, and from now on, all fines would get credited there. That's a different conversation, right? That's and so I think we just need clarity on what we're talking about and what your and finance team are recommending that we talk about, just because finance committee is going to want to know this too, and so we've just got to.
Understood.
Yeah, it would seem like if the money was appropriated, it could not, at this time, without an additional change, go into the revolving fund because there is a cap.
Yeah.
Right.
So it has to.
We're not talking about it going there. But we're not talking about.
Yeah. That's why I would go to the.
We're not going to talk. That would have been one avenue to do it, but now we're talking about doing something else. So.
Clear as mud. We'll get there.
Okay.
I think Amy can just, if Amy just makes the clear recommendation. I just I think that if we're gonna be increasing, the line item, you've gotta adjust the whole budget. That's all. I'll wait for Amy.
Okay, so we need the mechanics cleaned up.
It's just the mechanics.
Just wanna understand where
I
it's going.
personally
Okay.
support
Okay.
getting that money over there, just wanna know how it works.
We'll work on that in the next.
But then the secondary question is, what we were talking about the increase to the revolving fund, but that's not on the table.
No,
not yet.
And we don't want that on the table?
That's something I'm happy to talk to the Historic Commission about, but I certainly think increasing it will give the Historic Commission a lot more opportunity to
Yeah.
preserve some of these buildings.
That would
I
be
see
ideal.
no downside.
As a
Yeah.
separate thing.
Yeah.
That would be ideal, because they're
Sean,
raising money
on
right
the
now,
board,
so.
You have a couple other revolving funds that have requested to also be included on the annual town meeting. So if it's okay with the board, I would prefer to do all revolving fund changes on annual town meeting.
I just have one question to that. Is the Historic Commission trying to raise money right now, and they need that increase right now?
We do have a fundraiser.
Is this timely?
There is a fundraiser, an active one going on for the Save the Glover campaign.
So.
But that's, I think, been set up to flow.
Yes.
Another
Yeah.
through a tax vehicle that it wouldn't come per se to the town.
Exactly.
Correct.
So
Right, so
this
that-
is.
that's how that is.
There is an
the
interim
fundraising,
solution. Ideally, this would be a change to the revolving fund sooner rather than later, but I don't believe it's a crisis.
Yeah.
Do it this time.
No, the annual town meeting, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. All right, moving on.
Article 5, are we still going?
Mr. Kane?
We're still going.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So Article 5 is just a placeholder in case there is a capital article, but we can skip that unless the board is aware of one, Mrs. Marks, or a particular capital article.
I'm not aware of anything.
I could come up with one.
That's not
Just
the
kidding.
invitation, Doug.
So why do we have it in here if the capital committee hasn't seen anything for capital articles?
It's just
simply a placeholder.
It's just a placeholder.
But you don't, does the town administrator know of anything that you're thinking about that could fill that placeholder? And you can say no.
Yeah, the 25,000 for Glover. I
But I
actually,
think that's in 4.
But that's
it is.
No, I understand, we're talking about 5.
I know. I'm just saying, if
No, let's talk about
if we're gonna appropriate that 25,000, I would prefer to see it come out of a capital article as opposed to the operating budget. So,
Well, it's not coming out of the operating budget, it's being used free cash.
it is, but Amy has just said that it's gonna come out of the line item in the.
It's going to go into there.
It's going to go into the line item, it's
Not
going to have to be balanced with something else. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I'll have to go
Right.
back and.
All right, so it sounds
why
like,
I'm
again,
s-
you
yeah.
needed to have,
Mechanics.
this
Yep.
got put in the warrant article pretty fast.
Got put
We needed
in
to
this
have more
afternoon.
conversation.
You got put in at 5:30.
We'll fix it.
We'll get
We can get that fixed.
Well,
Yes,
let's not make it seem like it's just a road.
It doesn't,
at
it doesn't
5:30.
matter, we just need, let's get it fixed.
On it.
6 is also a
So
placeholder.
6 and 7 are 2 placeholders for Hawthorne and Hadley if there is a need for the March town meeting for either of those projects.
I can't envision anything on 6, the Hawthorne needing anything, I think, so.
I don't believe so.
Unless anybody, I would be fine just deleting that placeholder, because I don't think it's needed.
Okay.
7, I do, we need to keep that placeholder right now until we, over the next few weeks, have further conversations on Hadley.
Okay.
There may be a need, but there very well could not be a need, so it doesn't, but that's just a placeholder, just to keep it open for that.
Okay. Pete?
Just to clarify, was that to remove the Hawthorne holder?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay, no problem. Okay, moving on, Article 8 is a state's placeholder, but it's a home rule legislation related to,
This is a good one for the town administrator to speak to.
So
Yes.
I've had a series of discussions over the last year and a half about the discount that we allow the Tedesco Country Club to receive under Chapter 61B. This is a piece of Massachusetts general law that allows property owners that have open space to receive significant relief on their property taxes. And frankly, given our revenue position, given all the complexities with, a private golf club, getting tax relief on behalf of every property tax owner in this town, I just think this is it's just a misuse of the spirit of this legislation. There are a number of communities, including Belmont and the city of Newton, that are also expressing frustration that golf courses in their communities are taking much-needed property tax revenue. This is $133,000 last year. If you compound that over 10 years, we're out millions, and it's all being subsidized by Swampscott taxpayers. And frankly, we need those revenues. We need those revenues for renewable energy. We need those revenues for a more sustainable community. We need those revenues to fix our pipes. We need those revenues to fix any number of things. And we need it yesterday. I can't stress how important it is for the town to move forward and have this conversation on Beacon Hill and urge our legislators to end the subsidy for private golf clubs that charge over $60,000 annually for memberships. It's just unfair, and it's unethical, and it needs to change.
And this is something that,
Go ahead, Doug.
It sounded like this is a little bit like the 16 and 17-year-old votes. Like, this is not something that other communities are trying to do, but there's not a precedent for success so far, but we would be joining a club.
That's right.
The most recent community is Belmont, which is the Belmont Country Club, which is one of the most prestigious. And it was a citizen petition seeking to have the exemption that Belmont Country Club, which has revenue of in excess of $20 million a year, lose their 75% tax discount they get for the benefit of having a country club. We actually have it worse than Belmont, because at least Belmont had a clubhouse they got to tax. In our town, we don't have the clubhouse. We have 16 of the holes, right? 16 of the holes? And we don't have the clubhouse. Marblehead has a clubhouse, and they get to tax that. So we actually have nothing, I mean, realistically here. And so Belmont, though, I think there was 3 no votes, 200-plus yes votes in Belmont to remove that tax exemption. And I appreciate that from a bygone era, someone thought it was a really good idea to do it, but it's not. I applaud you, Sean, and I know that the Globe did an article last year, and Tedesco's highlighted there, and I know that you've been talking about this for many, many years, and I applaud you for putting it on the warrant article so that the taxpayers can actually decide whether or not a private country club should get a 75% tax break.
So can we talk about the process just with the home rule legislation and how long this process can take, can drag
6 months
out, can drag
to
out?
a year. It can be extensive. We went through a home rule for civil service, better part of 6 months. I have discussed this with Representative Armini, and we've discussed strategies for working with Newton and Newton and Belmont. So
what about Marblehead? To Peter's point, part of it's in Marblehead.
Yeah.
Well, they tax.
So they would tax their stuff.
They can decide for themselves if they want to.
I understand, but so they have no incentive to be joining.
No, those 3 holes probably are in chapter. So I'm happy to follow up with the Marblehead Town Administrator and see if there's a level of support for that.
Great.
So could you just walk me through this? So we would, if we were to approve this, then it just goes to under the home rule petition, and then we just keep our fingers crossed that the home rule petition.
We don't keep our fingers. We go up and.
But yeah, we have to wait. But I think Sean's we're gonna actively encourage passage.
So are you saying that this could get passed within a year?
All depends on the political leadership that would be willing to address this inequity.
And the opposing forces.
That's right. It's a democracy,
It's very interesting. It's been a while since I took civics.
It's $133,000 a year and growing.
I know I've had conversations with Representative Armini about this, so.
You and I have talked about that, yeah, and she has shared her concerns about the, you know, the influence. I'm not concerned about the influence. I'm concerned about the taxpayers in Swampscott.
Good for you. I'm seriously, good for you. And I do want to do a shout out. When Polly Titcomb was on the select board, she
absolutely,
I think, was 1 and 1A on her list, and she met with you often. I mean, so champion this, but I'm glad it's coming to fruition. But I want to give her credit because
absolutely, Polly was.
It's really important.
Yep. I also want to just recognize Dick Simmons, our interim assessor. He was very helpful in helping me, you know, get some information and analyze some data that really helped reinforce.
I'm not sure Dick appreciates you saying that. It probably messed up his application for the country club.
There's a few municipal clubs that will take him.
All right. Anything else on 8? Pete, continue, please.
Sure. Article 9, this is a charter and a general bylaw amendment request. This is regarding the election item that Peter had mentioned earlier in the meeting. It is a 2-part article. The first part dealing the items to amend the charter. Part B is the item to amend the general bylaws.
I think it's worthwhile for us to maybe see if Lauren Goldberg might be able to join a select board meeting virtually, just to kind of walk through, because she is quite, I mean, she's extremely impressive as an election law attorney. I mean, she speaks all across the state on this, and really it was very helpful to interact with her, because she's really very focused on these things. And there's a little bit, I gave, I think, a decent summary, but also I want to make sure everybody understands the mechanics. For example, there's a postcard requirement that goes out to make sure that people know about early voting and things like that. There's other elements of this which are really, I think, dynamic and interesting, but I want to make sure everybody's clear on those. And same with Article 12, which is the election age one.
I thought the charter was changed, and it says not Board of Selectmen.
You know what? It's really interesting you say that. I actually think, just so you know, I think the home rule petition's still sitting there. And I don't think the home rule petition's been signed that changes.
It is still sitting there.
Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Wasn't that two?
So I think technically our charter still says Board of Selectmen, but we've euphemistically converted that because it's a stupid name.
Absurd. Cue the
It should be
irony.
gone. It should be gone like the tax.
It hasn't gone through yet.
It's being
It got
advanced.
lost.
Well, maybe a man can ask for
Dog ate our-
directions.
Dog ate our home rule petition.
Our home rule petition got lost, but it's back on path.
Representative Armini
Great.
has that, and she and Senator Crichton are advancing that.
Great.
Perfect.
They found it.
Okay. Next.
Next is Article 10, which is the charter amendment. This is relating to the request to amend the charter and allow and make eligible 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the annual and special town meeting elections, or town elections.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, so we skipped over the sponsored by things. Just if you don't mind humoring me with, we're going to go back to 8, which is the home rule petition. So presumably that's going to be select board, maybe. I'm going to encourage us to have it be select board or TA and TA. We can do both.
Select board and TA.
Hopefully 9 and 10, the select board feels like they can, and the TA can sponsor that. And now we're at 11, which similarly, and 12 similarly, but, sorry, I just wanted to go back to.
Go ahead, Pete, with 11.
11 is a general bylaw amendment for these to include and adopt the specialized energy code. The energy code, similar to our stretch code, is part of our general bylaws. Currently, the way that it's written in here is that it would be Article 30. My recommendation is actually that it should be Article 17, which would of tonight, just the language. This is an amendment request for specialized energy code. And then the actual language of the energy code article for the general bylaw is in Appendix A, and it is based on a state model.
Right, so Pete, what you're saying is if you made it Article 17, it would renumber everything after 17?
Correct.
All right, so but that's why we probably don't want to do that, because all the cross-references get thrown off, and we have to then go change all the cross-references. So you might want to just, I'm not looking at the bylaw, but it may just want to be a new section 16A, for example. If there's already a 16, there's already a 17, you can create a section 16A and keep all your cross-references the same, just because we've gotten tripped up previously on this, where we inserted something and didn't get all the cross-references, and then
Right.
the right hand and the left hand are looking at each other, not knowing what to do.
We're going to figure that out.
Okay.
This is the topic that Mr. Hill was speaking on, correct?
Yeah, so are we going to have sometime in the next meeting or two a presentation on this, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, that would be the plan.
Okay.
This is what I sent around.
Yeah,
in
I
advance,
appreciate you sent it.
But I think the February 7th, if that's sufficient time, when that similar groups are coming anyway, they can speak to this at the same time.
Right.
Resiliency.
So the royal you will have there'll be a presentation slide.
I'll basically go through what I sent around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I do. Can I just say, that sounds efficient, but I also don't want to overshadow the resiliency conversation. I mean, this is very important, and by the way, I'm there, so like I'm totally there. I just don't. I appreciate that you asked Harbor to come in and other committees to come in and talk about resiliency, not just like literally, not just how do we turn around the unfortunate problems that we've caused with our environment, but what do we do now to protect some of our resources, just given the actual realities that we're facing today. I really. No
Totally.
Disrespect to the topic.
Just similar people.
I just want to make sure that we don't do anything to dilute that focus for a good portion of the meeting, only because we have never had that conversation. I mean, like really, and I just looked at the CIP, and it's embarrassing the lack of projects that sit in a multi-year, many-decade CIP that have resiliency. And so we have to play catch up on this. So I'm just. If we can just make sure that we don't overcrowd the meeting such that we shortchange the resiliency conversation, because I think that's really timely for us.
Understood. I mean, we're gonna have a pretty busy agenda with discussion of the warrant, right, and with special guests arriving, but we will make sure that we.
The other thing to note,
allocate plenty of time.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
This can be pretty, I believe this can be pretty streamlined, this conversation here.
Right.
And as I mentioned last meeting, I don't know if it was after 3 or 4 hours, but it was Climate Action Committee, Conservation Commission, and Harbor and Water did start getting together with MARZ to talk about resiliency grant funding.
Yep.
And it does kind of segue, because by doing the specialized code and climate leader stuff, you actually get access to more grants to do resiliency planning. So these all kind of go together. There's also municipal vulnerability grants, which we got one, and we have an opportunity to do more. So these all do kind of come together, not to kind of water anything down.
No, it's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, they do very much segue.
And Doug, can you also speak to really the timing and the urgency of which for us to take action here now rather than at our annual town meeting in May?
Right. Simply said, I think Ryan spoke to it. There are large projects potentially coming that this would affect, and we want to make sure that there's an even playing field for everyone. But most importantly, really, it frees up larger grants faster. Just to put a number on it very quickly, like being a climate leader, which requires doing specialized, frees up $500,000 level grants to do decarbonization work. You don't get that with just being a green community like we are today. So that's like, in some ways, cut to the chase, like what the two prongs of the benefit of doing this now are. And, a lot of other communities are doing this, et cetera, et cetera. Salem, our good friend Neil, they're probably voting on it tomorrow. So this is kind of happening everywhere. That's in our ilk of communities.
Thanks.
I think the other good news for us is that, and we didn't highlight it, but this warrant shows a town meeting that's 1 week later than when we set our schedule last time we were together, and we did this every meeting schedule. It was still going to be on the 4th, and so this is actually on the 11th, because it changed just because there's a primary on the 5th.
Oh, we changed it?
Yeah, so it's the 11th.
Okay.
Right, and so it's on the 11th because the 4th, we concerned that if it went to more than one night, we couldn't have consecutive nights because the 5th is a primary date.
And the clerk.
And so we can't have it then. So it was moved. The moderator made some good suggestions after talking with the clerk about double booking the clerk like that. So we have a little bit more breathing room.
So what's the date now?
March 11th.
March 11th.
The 11th.
First night of Ramadan.
But it looks like an agenda that you should save the 12th as well, just to be candid.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we already have.
Okay, baby.
I'm talking to
I love town meetings.
my
Doesn't
colleague
matter.
about that.
Got it. 12th of March,
Town meeting.
not just the 12th of February, where we're.
Yeah, try back on 12 March.
Meeting as well.
Oh.
Just book all your days.
Yeah, right.
Take them all.
All right. All right, Pete, bring it home.
Yep.
Sure. All right, and the final article in this warrant is the appropriation for park grant. This is for a transfer of available funds or to borrow a sum of $103,870. This is related to the pickleball request. There are a couple of modifications versus what was on the January town warrant. The first is the language stays the same per the request of the state as far as the park grant is concerned with the article. However, the comment and the motion would be to appropriate free cash rather than borrowing. The other change is that it would be pickleball courts that would be located at Phillips Park, but not at a specific location. That location will be determined during a public process post-town meeting. So once the allocation is made, the town will then work with designers and the public in order to determine the location within the Phillips Park. We did receive an authorization from the state in order to get an extension on getting this approval, but we do need to get this approved in March so that the town then has enough time to get a design and that design submitted so that we can then get the grant and the permit started for July 1.
And Pete, just also as a matter of clarification for Article 12, because there's the use of free cash rather than borrowing, it's a majority, simple majority versus a 2/3.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Is it required that we specify, I appreciate the kind of flexibility about the location within Phillips Park. Is it being in Phillips Park required?
It is.
As part of the grant still?
We have to identify a location or locus area.
So can you just, David and I had a little exchange on this, but I just want to have it out loud just to make sure we're feeling. So look, I get it, 65%, 3 votes short of a supermajority voted for this. And so this just puts it back before town meeting and allows a simple majority to prevail, which again, democracy is funny like that. I've never understood the 2/3 voting requirement for bonding, but put that aside. We'll change that by special petition some other day. My question is, I mean, just from a pure financial standpoint, regardless of what the money's being used for, mechanically, is the preference from the financial team? It's net $50,000, right? So it's 103. I'm just using round numbers. Net 50 after we get the grant. Let's just use round numbers. Is the preference to use free cash, or is it just free cash because that actually is a vehicle that requires less vote, and the preference would still be to bond this and not use free cash, in which case my question is whether or not we shouldn't, and I don't disagree with David. David said maybe just streamline it, but put 2 warrant articles, the first one being bonding and the second one being free cash, and if the first one doesn't pass, then the second one passes. And I'm just saying I don't want, for expediency, to let just a majority prevail. If you want, if the finance team,
it's not enough of a concern about free cash.
Okay.
You know, frankly, if it was a larger.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay, I just wanted to ask it because I didn't want us to sacrifice principles of good finance.
Yep.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Peter.
Yeah, that's all.
Having a little more room on our debt service line is probably equally
that's
as helpful.
So I want to just press just a little bit, because I mean, I I actually didn't end up being here. I was sick when this happened. But I know that there was a lot of, concern, people around Phillips Park, for sure, obviously. And I just want to press to make sure, because we've gotten, it seems, flexibility to move the location within Phillips Park. It is absolutely positively required. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We have to, for this grant, as it stands right now, it has to be in Phillips Park.
That's my understanding. I will double check with the.
I'm not looking to make it more complicated, but I just want to understand what the.
We've identified that
corners of
area
this
in the
are.
grant application, so, we can explore whether or not, there's some process to change it.
Has there, this is going to be slightly off topic, so if it's more than one sentence answer, forget it. We'll talk about it later. Has there been any engagement with the neighborhood yet about this process? I mean, this is the first I was finding out the fact that actually this was coming back up. So I don't know, has there been any other engagement yet, or do we plan to engage substantively?
I believe the Director of Community and Economic Development has reached out to the neighborhood, but I'll look into that. And
yeah, let's please make sure that.
We have talked about.
Doesn't mean everyone's going to agree, but let's just make sure that we really kind of try to process this ahead, so we're not worried about 2/3 or 1/2 or whatever.
Understand. We want to make sure that we're good neighbors.
And
thank you.
are we sure that in Phillips Park, that it can be built in Phillips Park due to any flood issues
We
or
are sure.
zoning?
Yes.
But you're not. I mean, like, I know you're saying that, I know, but no, Mary Ellen was asking a good question. I mean, I know you're saying you are, look at, but it's a little bit of the cart before the horse. It hasn't been designed yet. It hasn't been cited, so no one can know that answer. I'm just being respectful to, like, the question. Yes, I think preliminarily, you guys have gotten feedback that it is.
We've reached out to the Conservation Commission. We've
No, but I'm not, but that's not, you can't say yes unequivocally, because we don't even have a location. So I'm just being really open about it, Mary Ellen. The answer is no. Like, he cannot say that. No one can. Preliminarily, did they do homework and talk to consultants? Did they talk to others and try and get a feel about things? Yes, but I don't think, they haven't even cited the location. It was here or here or here. And so the answer is no. Part of this and part of the grant is going to allow them the funds to engage the wetland scientists to do the notice of intent and go through the Conservation Commission and make sure if it's in a floodplain, how it's being dealt with and how it complies with the Wetlands Protection Act. That's part of the grant program. And so the state doesn't require us to permit it before we go through the process. The permitting is part of the process with the state. So just, you're asking a fair question. I just want to be specifically clear that no one can tell you unequivocally it can go there.
Which may mean that the 100,000, 103,000, or whatever it is to build it, that was the number we knew specifically before when it was a very specific site. So in order to take care of the flooding issues and things like that, it may actually be different.
It could. The mitigation could end up being more, and then they would have to come back to us anyways. Yeah. Yes, that is a possibility. But with every project, right, for that matter, I guess.
Okay.
But I guess too then, in that same vein, if they thought a location might be appropriate and it turns out it isn't for various permitting issues, then another location might be looked into, not outside of the park, but within the park, that might lend itself differently. So, just to say that.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to ask this, can you tell me, will you absolutely vetted all different areas, like up by here, up by Aggregate, in the back by Tedesco? I mean, maybe,
We haven't
I don't
done
think
a
Tedesco wants to give us a plan
comprehensive
now,
site
but-
selection. We identified the park for a number of, I think good reasons, that it has ample parking. It's connected to a number of other recreational, amenities, and certainly we have looked around. We've looked at a few different sites, but we feel like this is centrally located and easy access for the town.
I also hope this is the first of several pickleball courts that will,
Me too.
that will transpire in Swampscott.
I think other
No,
neighborhoods
no,
are
no.
going to be clamming, to have their pickleball court as well.
Okay, in some ways, to me, this is actually really interesting. I think the fact that we actually know in advance that 65% of town meeting approved it, just 3/4 show, that's actually almost town meeting saying, hey, we want this. And so in some ways, for me, this is actually easier this time than it was the first time I was on the warrant. Because now I actually know it's the same town meeting members, it's the same
Hopefully.
thing, is that they've made it perfectly clear that 65% of them wanted it. And so to me, it's actually easier this time than it was last time. Like last time, we didn't know, and so we didn't have a mandate or instruction. It kind of feels like instruction this time to me, personally.
Thanks. All right, so we have a little bit of homework.
We do, and I think, you know, if the board is in agreement that this stays on the warrant, we will reach out immediately with the neighborhood, and we'll redouble our efforts to engage folks that are abutters.
Okay, thanks. All right, we'll move on now to discussion and possible vote on the selection of an independent consultant for review of blasting plans at HOLCIM, Inc.
So this is a standard practice, you know, in the earth removal permit. The board is identified as the approval authority for consultants. Brierley Associates has worked with the town over the last few years to really look at a number of impacts that quarry has on the community. This particular scope would analyze 2023 blasting data and blasting reports, and provide a scope of work to help us just really understand and summarize the blasting impact, the exceedances, and provide support for our earth removal committee. I did receive some information today by the chair of the ERAC that had asked to update the scope. So what I would ask is the board to authorize me to work with the earth removal committee and revise this scope and provide some technical edits to this to ensure that we capture all of the details that the earth removal committee is looking for.
So is that, are you asking us to approve this?
No.
In the amount of, for the amount of $10,000?
I am.
But that the scope may be tweaked just because.
That's right.
That's all, I'm just trying to be clear on this, okay? And this is the annual, if you will, and this amount's repaid through the aggregate earth removal permit, correct? So this is just the annual consultant and the annual review that happens here. Okay, I'm just saying it out loud to make sure I'm clear.
Happy to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move that we authorize Sean to proceed with making any technical tweaks to this up to the $10,000 that's envisioned in this scope in order to comply with the earth removal permit.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Go forth. Godspeed. We're going to move on. Hadley Hotel RFP update from Peter and Katie, and I think we also had Pete Kane.
I think as though it's pretty quick. Sean did a great introduction for us. And Katie, feel free to jump in here, but I think Sean already said it. So on the 21st of December was the deadline for the RFP. We received 7 submissions to the RFP. All of them are on the town website, and the assistant town administrator during this meeting has emailed me to say that there's actually a news link on the front page that that references those, so it gets you directly to those RFP responses. So the 7 responses are up on the responses. Important to note a couple of things about the responses, I think very high level, just information. With the exception of 2 responses, all the responses at preliminary review actually comply with zoning and comply with the zoning that town meeting passed here. So 2 responses do seek some things outside of the zoning that town meeting passed, which doesn't per se disqualify them, but it is something that we've noted. But the other 5 complied best we can tell, preliminarily based on schematics that are included in the package. We do encourage groups to look at them. We have, and when I say we, a subcommittee of the town administrator, the Director of Community and Economic Development, the Director of Planning and Assistant Town Administrator, Pinnacle Advisors, who the town has retained to, who's a hotel consultant, and Katie Phelan and myself interviewed all 7 respondents virtually. We didn't ask them to come to town, even though several of the respondents live very close here. And then we ultimately submitted follow-up written questions and follow-up questions, and then ultimately made a recommendation based on that to select the 3 top proposals. Those proposals are respondents, are scheduled and have confirmed that they will be here on Tuesday, January 30th, starting at 6:30 p.m. I'm right with 6:30, right, Pete?
6 o'clock, I think.
That's why I'm asking the questions. That's what I meant to say. 6 o'clock?
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
Sorry, starting at 6 o'clock in this room. Each of the 3 groups will be here, and they will do a presentation, followed by select board questions, and then followed by public questions. And so there'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions and learn more about the process. Tentatively, it's on our agenda to then, as a board, come together and discuss in public meeting on February 7th.
Yep.
Next steps from there. So that's where we are right now. Pinnacle was fantastic for us. The things they're asking about, they are really focusing, just kind of put it out there. There are really 2 key aspects of this from just a vetting perspective. 1, building, developing, doing something. 2, running a hotel, right? And we're not looking to run an empty building, right? We're not looking to have something in 5 years that's not viable. And so really what Pinnacle really honed in on more so than the rest of us, because we've all stayed at hotels, but none of us are hoteliers, is they really focused on the operating assumptions. Like what are the economics? What are the economics that you're assuming or what you need to have to be successful here? Challenge those, shake them, make sure they hold. And then also, what's your experience, right? What's your true experience, not just as a hotelier, but someone that's doing a boutique suburban community? How reliant are you on room revenue versus food and beverage revenue and ancillary services, things like that. So it helped them see and give us better feedback as to who they think would be stronger, a sponsor of a project for us. And so just having them as part of that dialogue, and they'll be available for us on the 7th, I believe. They'll be available for us to include them in the conversation on the 7th, so we can all ask questions. And if we have follow-up questions after the 30th, there's an opportunity for us to submit questions to respondents. So it's been a lot of work. And many, many hours of work just to get here, and I really appreciate Pinnacle and staff, because staff, Pete and Marzi.
Max Casper?
Sorry, Max was in charge of all of our tours. Sorry, I forgot about that. So, Katie, did I leave anything that you want to say?
No, I do just want to encourage attendance for the event on the 30th, and encourage a little bit of homework before that night. The proposals that we received, some of them were breathtaking and exciting and innovative, and some of them were different and intriguing. And we brought forward 3 of the RFP respondents that we really felt like not just could develop something, but could have success going forward. As Peter said, Pinnacle was a partner in that, really the leader in that conversation, because we don't do well with vacant buildings here in town, and we don't want this to be a vacant building. We want this to be a successful entryway to Humphrey Street, a revitalization of that corridor. And so I would just encourage public attendance and, really looking at those RFPs and coming in with some questions. That's what they're here for. They're here to understand, about noise and swimming pools and spas and how how we get small businesses to integrate into their business. And I encourage that sort of communication with them.
So is the plan for next Tuesday to have a 10, 15-minute presentation?
Yeah, so I appreciate you saying that. Not only that, I just realized that the link doesn't actually tell you who the 3 groups that are coming are, and I haven't
So don't
said it
read
either.
them all.
For no reason. I assume the link said it. So, yeah, you don't, certainly, so there are 7 proposals on the town website. You should look at all 7 because there's ideas. There may be things that you like in something that wasn't necessarily finance that you want to explore and have conversations about. So by all means, feel free to look at them all. The 3 groups in no order, I'm just reading from here, in no order whatsoever, is that are coming is Clearview Investment Management. They operate under the Delamar brand, the Drew Companies, and Knowin' Group are the 3 groups that will be presenting on January 30th, but certainly look at all the proposals if you want to and be familiar with them. But those are the 3 groups that will be presenting. The presentation format is 15 minutes presentation for each group, one at a time. Again, they're coming in no order of anything. They're just was randomly picked. 15 minutes presentation by them, 15 minutes of select board questions, and 15 minutes of public. And then we would probably take a 15-minute break for the next group to set up and then go through it 2 more times that night. And so just to keep it under 3 hours or at 3 hours, we had to limit presentations, you know, and that if the questions end quicker, then it'll be less than 45 minutes. But that's the presentation format for everyone. They'll have electronic, and then they're also bringing a board, which we will then put in town hall, so that people at town hall also can see materials when they come into town hall.
Great. Thanks.
Pete Kane, if you're still listening, or Sean, can we just make sure that I think we should update this link here to identify the 3 groups that are coming on January 30th, sure. and I think update January 30th, right, and tell people about the meeting and coming here and help us advertise that, please.
I'm in the middle of doing that right now. I wanted you to announce it first.
Of course you are. All right, thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll move on. Discussion and possible vote on members for the Water and Sewer Infrastructure Advisory Committee. Sean.
Sure. You know, I really appreciate the number of individuals that have reached out and asked to be considered for this committee. I had a chance to reach out and speak to almost every individual that applied. They all come with an extraordinary background and passion for helping Swampscott succeed. I'm really frustrated that we can't appoint all of them to the committee. I think each of them would contribute to the best of their abilities to help us think more critically about our infrastructure. Unfortunately, we only have 7 seats. I am really begrudged not to pull out all of the chairs for individuals. We need everybody to help us as a community. But tonight I'm pleased to recommend Liz Smith. Liz has an extraordinary professional background. She's frankly a wonderful person to work with. She's certainly somebody that can tolerate differences of opinion in a very tactful way. She has demonstrated that she rolls her sleeves up and really gets into the nuances of regulatory positions. She's no stranger to our meetings and certainly would think that she would benefit this committee in any number of ways. She has a deep knowledge of the issues affecting Kings Beach, and she's willing to learn more and more. Kelly Deegan is a former member of our Finance Committee. She's demonstrated a real passion for helping Swampscott. Kelly joined me a few years ago in a trip over to Lynn Water and Sewer, along with Gino Cresta, to really think about how we can work more effectively with Lynn Water and Sewer She shows a real passion for environmental sustainability. She is an environmental engineer at a leading environmental firm. While she focused on this committee, I think gives us that added benefit of somebody that really knows the town, knows our history, and really can help us advocate as we need to for additional funding and support for our infrastructure. Ralph Souza is a civil and sanitary engineer. And has spent time on our rate setting committee. Certainly has a resume that is about as well established, as any engineer. And I think his experience, along with that of Charlie Patzios, Charlie is not an engineer. He has a rare, non-engineering background, but Charlie is a very notable member of town meeting, and certainly has served on our rate committee. Chris Volke is a molecular biologist. He is absolutely a fascinating individual who brings a great deal of empirical, analysis to this position. There's a lot of important biology that we need to consider, and I think that voice is critical. Lauren Fisher is a terrific project manager and certainly somebody that has experience, working in, business and has a passion for, supporting the town. Adam Smythe has a terrific background in oceanography, and certainly for alternatives, or alternate member Brian Drummond, Jeff Kaplan, Matt Phelan, Terry Dansil, and frankly Andrea Amore. I mean, all of the folks that really have so many talents. I would love to see them be engaged as subcommittee members. I don't think this committee has to just function as a board. We need subcommittees on public engagement. We need subcommittees on state and federal regulations or grants. There's any number of opportunities to serve. I would certainly encourage the committee to be as ambitious as possible and really, engage as many of the individuals that have expressed an interest in serving. I think in the spirit of our efforts to talk about voting, I think we've got to be as inclusive as possible with an issue like this. It needs as many individuals to support the broadest responsibility that we have. That said, I know that there may be some other ideas, and I'm happy to turn it over to the board for an opportunity to hear more of your thoughts.
Wait to me like I have an idea.
No. Go ahead.
I do have an idea.
Yeah?
I'd like to see a student member on the committee.
Awesome. Great idea. Yep.
I don't know who that is, but we should find them.
That's exactly what I wrote down too, Katie. Yeah, it is challenging because the one gentleman, young gentleman that we are all familiar with, Sam, that is on climate action and shows up at solid waste and others, and is the chair of the environmental committee at the high school and all that. He's been trying to encourage his fellow students to get engaged, and that hasn't necessarily materialized yet. But sure. So I think the efforts you're talking about, Peter, with voting. I mean, we do need to make a really concerted effort. I know Neil got this started with climate action with having 2 students, and we're trying to get another one for climate action. So absolutely, totally agree with that. And I just want to echo, having looked through all the respondents to this. I mean, it is amazing when you go through an exercise like this to see the expertise of the people here in town. I don't know how many GE engineers we have here, but there's a lot of them.
Is there a GE plant around here?
Yeah, something like that, I think, yeah. Very cool, very cool. So I'm really excited to get this committee up and running and rolling. And, I just want to acknowledge, Andrea, like kind of doing everything that you do kind of outside of the committee, I think is really, really a really important, complementary strategy. We have complementary strategies for IDDE. We have complementary strategies for making all this stuff happen. So I think this is kind of a really good balance and effective way to kind of, move forward with people here that are kind of on the committee and people kind of surrounding the committee. So I'm just really excited to get things rolling.
I just have a quick question. So is this a one-year term and then we roll it, next year we roll it into?
Lifetime?
I think we talked staggered.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
We did talk staggered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that, we can, frankly, in a random way, just, list 1, 2, and 3, and just, give the committee a little bit of continuity. We certainly want some folks to serve for a few years. I do think it's going to take a lot to really get baptized. It's more complicated than I think many people might believe. It's a complicated system. It's going to require time to really come up to speed.
I'd just like to reduce some of the complications right now and just how, as far as we are going to be voting on this tonight, so we should probably be voting on the terms at the same time. And what's the next process as far as?
So maybe Sean spends a minute jotting some notes down on that.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
And then when will they be able to have a meeting, and what is the procedure? What's the next step?
Yeah.
That's all.
I have questions about that as well. Have we designated who the select board liaison is?
We voted for you when you were out of the room.
Right, but in case I, like a town meeting member with one vote, say I didn't want it. No, I'm just joking. Do we have a liaison? No, seriousness?
We do not.
So I'm a little, look, at one of the hardest, my experience has been one of the hardest things for committees, especially new committees, is that they are thrown into a functioning government that they don't necessarily know how it functions, right? And so I think it's really, tonight we should designate who that liaison is in my view, or we can do it next week or whenever we meet next. But I just, and I just wanted to say generally about the committee, I think it's great, and you guys have all had thoughts about, and I'm fine with everything that we're doing here. This committee is an advisory committee, which means that it's not an advocacy committee, meaning people aren't selected because they believe one thing, and we want to make sure their one thing's on the table. I hope what we've done is we've identified people who varying backgrounds, but are intellectually curious and open-minded enough to hear everything and understand there's ideal, then there's ideal within financial reality, then there's less than ideal, there's, and sometimes, it's complicated, a subject matter in and of itself, but then you put it within municipal finance structure and political structure and regulatory framework, it gets really complicated. So I'm encouraged and I'm hopeful that everybody's coming open-minded. They can have opinions, but be open-minded to understand that. But I'm more interested in understanding how we are supporting the committee. I previously suggested, and the language got changed, which is fine, to have the town's consultants there, and I know that they'll be on call, but we don't have a budget, right? We don't have, we haven't engaged a consultant to say, hey, we're going to do a preliminary kickoff. You need to do a tutorial for some of these, not everybody has been engaged like some of them are, and so I just want to make sure that we're setting this up, and I don't think we have a budget for a consultant. I don't think we have a consultant per se, and I'm not trying to micromanage any of the work of the committee, but I also want to make sure that they're supported, and I don't know how we support them, because I don't think we've advanced that conversation enough to know that we have resources to do all those things, and we can set them in the right direction. And then once they're in a direction, they can do their thing, whatever it is. But I'm just concerned that we don't have.
Peter, I hear you. I think, look, I had a chance to have a conversation with all of these individuals. These individuals are as sophisticated as I think we'd ever hope to have. They're masters in public health. They're got their doctorate degree, they have engineering degrees. They're very, very smart, and I think they will work with us as we ramp up. The town has existing contracts with consultants. We have staff that will be available to help get them up and going. We don't want to micromanage the committee, just like every other committee. We want them to come to us with questions, and we will do our best to support them. I appreciate that it's an advisory committee, and I think we're going to have to make sure everybody understands, like, this isn't a governing body. It works in the framework of a governance structure where we all have to work together. We have to kind of figure out how to advance priorities, advance capital projects, advance, operational responsibilities. I'm not concerned about a budget for this committee right now, but I'm concerned that, frankly, we might need some additional financial support, but that will all materialize as we kind of hit the ground.
So I appreciate that. And I agree with everything you said. I just want to make sure that those resources, the right staff contact, and again, the liaison here can be helpful as well, but frankly, a staff contact that is can execute and
sure.
Just as important, because I don't want, the worst thing is to have people come volunteer their time and then feel as though they're spinning their wheels and don't know how to do things that they're not expected to know, right? And then get frustrated by it and then take their special skill set and go home, right? Which is the worst outcome for me.
Agreed.
So if you can please make sure that
I think there's plenty of things for this committee to really help advance.
I know. I hear you. I just want to hear that you're saying yes, that we're going to have a specific staff designee.
We are.
We're going to do this select board thing tonight. Okay, that's all. I mean, I agree, but I just want to make sure that we have that commitment, and you're going to identify that and can come back to us and tell us who that is. That would be great.
So I just have a quick question, because what is different with what we were sent tonight is we don't have a voting staff member on here. So.
We did.
Well, I think you took them. I think you. I say you. I'm not talking. Somebody over here made a recommendation to remove them from voting staff members.
As a voting staff member.
So they're ex officio.
On this document?
Yeah, just like solid waste.
Solid waste.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
And then I have a recommendation just for the staggered terms. So, just kind of going down the list, I'd recommend Liz Smith and Kelly Began have 3-year terms. Ralph Supay, Charlie Patsios, and Chris Vockley, 2-year terms. Lauren Fisher, Adam Smythe, 1-year terms, and the alternates would also have 1-year terms. And just for specificity's sake, the 1-year terms would expire June 30, 25. 2-year terms expire June 30, 26. 3-year terms June 30, 27.
Right.
Liz, you cool with that?
Time flies when you're having fun.
If none of you want to be the liaison between now and June, I would volunteer my time, but if somebody else wants to.
I'm happy to volunteer my time.
Okay, that's great.
Yep.
I'm happy to volunteer your time too.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.
Is that a motion?
I would entertain a motion.
Okay, so.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the list of members for this new, what is the name of this committee going to be?
What is
Water and Sewer Infrastructure.
Water and Sewer
Advisory
Infrastructure Advisory Committee,
Staggered
along with the
terms
staggered terms as listed.
Second. Do we have to approve? We don't have to approve the liaison. You'll just designate yourself as liaison.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Go for it. 6 pipes.
All right.
Consent agenda. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the board. The select board may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any board member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion.
Can you remove the minutes, and can we put that on for the next meeting? I just didn't get a chance to go through them.
No problem with that.
I'd move the consent agenda minus the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Select board time.
think it was 2014 or 2016, Kleinfelder did a very, very lengthy study on resiliency.
Mhm.
And there's a number of items in that study that recommend things that we should be doing.
Yep.
And I really think that we should pull that study out, dust off some of those cobwebs, and start doing some things. For example, they did make a recommendation on how to protect the fish house, and at the time, the cost was going to be, I think, between $20,000 and $30,000. And I think maybe going and looking at something like that again, looking and seeing what they recommended for the seawalls. So it's been a while since I looked at that study, but I think we should look at that study again.
Can I comment on that? Can I chime in? to-
During your select board time.
Oh,
Okay, all right.
I can share.
Go ahead, no, you, go ahead.
Okay,
You have 3 minutes, Mary Ellen. David said.
and I just,
I'm timing it.
You'll yield 30 seconds.
For that.
I want to give an update on Solid Waste Advisory Committee. We are looking to make sure we have a few more applicants to fill our new seats there. That's real important. I think Diane's doing a great job making sure we get all that. I'm hoping if you could, David, put that on the agenda to make sure before the 15th, we have some candidates that have already applied, if they could get vetted and advanced.
Okay.
And as far as the rest of my committees, I'll just hold off on getting back on those.
Thanks. Doug?
That people have already actually dug back into those reports, as per this conversation I mentioned before about the resiliency, the Concom. Tony Bandritz, of course, had the reports all with her, and people on the committee have actually dug all these things out, and so those things are being surfaced, and will be, that there's a process for that, but I'm sure we can have that be part of the presentation on the 7th to bring those to light.
Great. Peter, Katie, anything else? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.